The bright afternoon sun gleamed against the towering glass facade of the Everest Hotel, a modern architectural marvel nestled among the historic buildings of the city. The sleek, elegant design projected an air of exclusivity and prestige, attracting travelers from around the globe who sought the pinnacle of luxury. Victoria Hayes, a poised black entrepreneur in her late 30s, stepped out of a gleaming black sedan, her every movement radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had built her success brick by brick. Her sharp navy suit hugged her frame with precision, and her aura commanded attention, though she carried herself with a composed humility. Victoria was no ordinary guest. She was the CEO of one of the nation's most successful real estate firms, a self-made billionaire who had clawed her way up from humble beginnings. Today, she was looking forward to a week of relaxation and planning for future ventures, and the Everest seemed the perfect place to balance work and luxury. However, as her heels clicked against the polished marble steps of the grand entrance, a familiar, unwelcome sense of foreboding settled over her. Her assistant, Lauren Collins, followed closely behind, carefully managing their luggage. Lauren, a diligent and sharp-witted professional, had been by Victoria's side for years, helping her navigate both the challenges of their early struggles and the triumphs of her meteoric rise. Despite Lauren's meticulous planning, down to triple confirming the reservation at the Everest Hotel, Victoria couldn't ignore the unease bubbling inside her. "Are you sure everything's set?" Victoria asked quietly as they approached the entrance. "Absolutely," Lauren replied with a confident smile. "I checked the reservation myself. You're their VIP guest for the week." Victoria gave her a small nod, grateful for Lauren's efficiency. She trusted her assistant implicitly. Lauren wasn't just an employee, she was a friend and confidant, someone who had seen Victoria through her toughest battles. But experience had taught Victoria that even the most carefully laid plans could unravel when prejudice was in play. As they stepped into the grand lobby, the Everest's opulence was impossible to miss. High ceilings adorned with crystal chandeliers, plush carpets that muffled every step, and the soft strains of classical music spoke to the kind of wealth the hotel catered to. Yet the beauty of the surroundings couldn't mask the subtle shift in the room as they entered. Victoria felt the weight of lingering stares, sharp and calculating, grazing over her like an unspoken challenge. At the reception desk stood a polished young woman in a crisp uniform. Her smile was professional but lacked warmth as her eyes flicked to Victoria, lingering a moment too long. Victoria had encountered that look many times before, polite on the surface, but undercut with hesitation and doubt. "Good afternoon," the receptionist greeted them, her tone clipped and cool. "How may I assist you today?" Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but Lauren, ever the assertive planner, stepped forward. "We have a reservation under Hayes. Victoria Hayes," she said crisply, her voice carrying an edge of authority. The receptionist hesitated, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she glanced at the screen. A frown flickered across her face. "One moment, please," she said, her gaze darting back to Victoria, a flash of discomfort in her expression. Victoria remained silent, her face calm but guarded. She had seen this play out too many times before: the stalling, the excuses, the sudden mix-up. A few moments later, the receptionist's frown deepened, and she picked up the phone, muttering something too low to hear. A tall man with neatly combed silver hair and an immaculate suit soon approached. His stride was purposeful, his expression carefully neutral, yet Victoria could sense the tension in his posture. "Good afternoon," he said, with a practiced smile, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Bennett, the manager here. I understand there's been an issue with your reservation?" Lauren, clearly annoyed, didn't wait for Victoria to respond. "There shouldn't be an issue," she said firmly. "We confirmed this weeks ago. This is unacceptable." Richard nodded as if placating her, but turned his attention to Victoria. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his tone tinged with feigned regret. Unfortunately, all of our suites are currently booked. I do apologize for the inconvenience. Victoria tilted her head slightly, studying him. His words were smooth, but his body language betrayed the truth. This wasn't a mistake or an oversight, it was deliberate. She had encountered this veiled discrimination before, the kind that hid behind professional smiles and courteous words. Lauren's frustration boiled over. Booked? That's impossible. She's a VIP client. Victoria raised a hand, silencing her assistant. Thank you, Lauren, she said softly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp, piercing through Richard's thin veneer of professionalism. I appreciate your time, Mr. Bennett, she continued, her tone measured. We'll make other arrangements. Richard blinked, as if surprised by her composure. Victoria turned on her heel and walked out of the hotel, her head held high. Lauren scrambled after her, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. This is ridiculous, Lauren fumed as they reached the car. We should call the press, or a lawyer, or… Victoria placed a hand on Lauren's shoulder, stopping her in her tracks. Lauren, she said quietly but firmly, I've fought this battle my whole life. Do you think this is the first time I've been denied something because of how I look? Lauren's anger softened into sadness. But you're Victoria Hayes, she said. You've worked for everything you have. You've earned it. And that's why I'm not going to fight them on their terms, Victoria replied, her voice steady. They expect us to get angry. They expect a spectacle. I won't give them the satisfaction. Lauren sighed, frustration still evident in her eyes. So, what now? Victoria's gaze hardened, her determination burning beneath the surface. Now, she said, we regroup. We find another place to stay tonight, and then… She allowed herself the hint of a smile. I have plans for the Everest. That evening, in the quieter comfort of a smaller boutique hotel, Victoria sat by the window, gazing out at the glittering city skyline. The sting of rejection still lingered, but it fueled a spark within her. She had spent her life breaking barriers and walking through doors others tried to shut in her face. This would be no different. If the Everest wouldn't welcome her as a guest, she thought, leaning back with a glint of resolve in her eyes, she would find another way inside. Not as a visitor, but as something much greater. Victoria Hayes didn't back down, and soon the Everest Hotel would learn exactly who they had dismissed. The morning light poured into Victoria's temporary hotel room, casting a golden glow over the meticulously organized desk where she sat. Her laptop hummed faintly, its screen illuminated with rows of data. Victoria's coffee sat untouched beside her, forgotten as she leaned closer to the screen, scrolling through financial reports, ownership records, and market analysis. The Everest Hotel might have denied her entry as a guest, but it would be hard-pressed to deny her as an investor, especially one with her resources. Lauren entered the room, her hands full of folders and a tablet tucked under one arm. She stopped when she saw Victoria's focused expression. You've been at this all night, haven't you? Lauren asked, setting the materials down on the desk. I slept, Victoria replied absently, though the faint shadows under her eyes told a different story. But I had an idea, and I couldn't let it go. Lauren perched on the edge of the desk, arms crossed. You're serious about this, aren't you? Taking on the Everest? Victoria finally looked up, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Serious doesn't even begin to cover it. This is more than just business, Lauren. This is personal. Lauren nodded slowly. She'd seen that look before, back when Victoria was building her company from scratch, defying every obstacle in her way. What's the plan? She asked. Victoria gestured to the screen. The Everest is owned by an investment group. On the surface, they look untouchable. Deep pockets, diversified portfolio, all of that. But the numbers tell a different story. They're struggling to keep their flagship property afloat. Occupancy rates are down, maintenance costs are up, and they're barely breaking even. Lauren scanned the financial data on the screen, her brows furrowing. And yet they still have the audacity to act exclusive. Exactly, Victoria said. They've been holding on to their image, but that image is starting to crack. The Everest might look like a fortress, but it's vulnerable, and I intend to take advantage of that. Lauren smirked. So what are we talking about? A hostile takeover? Victoria shook her head, a sly smile creeping onto her lips. Nothing hostile about it. I'll approach them with a generous offer, one they can't refuse. I'll buy the Everest and everything that comes with it, and when I'm done, it'll be unrecognizable. Lauren leaned back, admiration flickering in her eyes. And here I thought you'd just call a lawyer. But no, you're planning to buy the whole thing. Victoria's smile widened. I don't just want an apology or a room for the night, Lauren. I want to own the narrative. The next few days were a flurry of activity. Victoria began assembling her team, reaching out to her most trusted advisors and legal experts. She tasked Lauren with managing her real estate empire in the background, ensuring that her other projects continued running smoothly while she focused on the Everest. Keep everything quiet, Victoria instructed during one of their strategy sessions. I don't want the investors knowing who's behind the offer until the last possible moment. Lauren raised an eyebrow. Why the secrecy? Because if they know it's me, they might dig their heels in out of pride, Victoria explained. This needs to look like a straightforward business deal, just another buyer swooping in to save them from financial trouble. Lauren couldn't argue with that logic. And if they refuse? Victoria's expression turned steely. They won't. I've studied their financials inside and out. Their margins are razor thin. One bad quarter, and they'll be desperate. I'm giving them an out before things get worse. They'll take it. Over the following weeks, Victoria's plan began to take shape. Through intermediaries, she approached the Everest's investment group with an offer that was both generous and strategic. Her legal team worked tirelessly to draft airtight contracts, ensuring that once the deal was finalized, Victoria would have full control over the hotel's operations. But the process wasn't without its challenges. The group's lead investor, Graham Sinclair, was known for his stubbornness and traditional views. He prided himself on maintaining the Everest's elite reputation, and his initial reaction to the offer was lukewarm at best. This is an unusual move, Sinclair said during a conference call with Victoria's representative. Why would anyone want to invest so heavily in a property like the Everest, especially in this economy? Victoria, listening quietly on mute, smiled to herself. She had anticipated this question. Her representative, a seasoned negotiator named Marcus, replied smoothly. Our client sees potential in the Everest that others might overlook. With the right leadership and vision, it could become more than just a luxury hotel. It could be a brand synonymous with innovation and inclusivity. Inclusivity? Sinclair scoffed. That's not what the Everest stands for. Perhaps not yet, Marcus said evenly. But times are changing, Mr. Sinclair. Staying relevant requires adaptability. Victoria resisted the urge to interject, knowing it wasn't the time to reveal herself. Instead, she let Marcus handle the conversation, trusting him to plant the seeds of doubt in Sinclair's mind. The days stretched into weeks as the negotiations continued. Victoria monitored every step from behind the scenes, her patience occasionally tested by Sinclair's hesitance. But she knew the group's financial position was growing increasingly precarious, and eventually they would have no choice but to accept. One evening, as Victoria reviewed the latest updates in her temporary office, Lauren entered with a triumphant grin. They've called for a final meeting, she announced. Sinclair wants to move forward with the deal. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. Perfect. Let's finalize it. The final meeting was set in a private conference room, where Sinclair and his board would gather to sign the contracts. Victoria insisted on attending in person, despite Marcus advising her otherwise. Are you sure you want to reveal yourself now? Marcus asked. You've stayed hidden this long. Victoria nodded. The time for hiding is over. I want them to see exactly who they've been dealing with. The day of the meeting arrived, and Victoria entered the sleek conference room with an air of calm authority. The investors sat on one side of the table, their expressions ranging from wary to curious. Sinclair himself looked every bit the part of a traditionalist, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and exuding an air of self-importance. As Victoria took her seat at the head of the table, Sinclair leaned forward, his sharp gaze fixed on her. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure of meeting," he said, extending a hand. Victoria accepted it with a firm grip. "Victoria Hayes," she said, her tone steady. "It's a pleasure." Sinclair's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Hayes?" he repeated. "You're the buyer?" "I am," Victoria confirmed, "and I'm looking forward to leading the Everest into its next chapter." The contracts were laid out, and as each page was signed, Victoria felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The hotel that had once turned her away was now hers, down to the last chandelier, and soon everyone within its walls would know it. The sun was setting as Victoria Hayes walked through the towering glass doors of the Everest Hotel, but this time, the feeling was vastly different. The grand lobby was just as opulent as she remembered. Polished marble floors gleamed under golden chandeliers, and plush velvet seating offered an air of exclusivity. Yet, the tension that had once gnawed at her as a rejected guest was gone. Now she strode through the space with confidence and purpose, the rightful owner of the Everest. Lauren trailed behind her, carrying a sleek leather portfolio. "The staff has been notified of the ownership change," she whispered. "Most of them are still processing it." Victoria smirked. "I'm sure they are. Let's make the introduction memorable." As they approached the front desk, the familiar receptionist from that fateful day froze. Her face went pale, and she stammered through a greeting. Good evening. Welcome to the Everest. How can I assist you?" Victoria's expression was cool but professional. "No need to worry. I'm not here as a guest today." The receptionist blinked in confusion, and then the realization dawned. Her eyes darted nervously to Lauren, then back to Victoria. "Oh, you're the new owner," Victoria finished for her, her tone measured. "Yes, I am. It seems we'll be seeing quite a bit of each other." The woman nodded quickly, her hands fumbling with the computer keyboard as though to appear busy. Victoria leaned in slightly, her voice low but firm. "Make sure the rest of the staff is prepared for our meeting in the conference room. We'll begin promptly." "Yes, ma'am," the receptionist managed, her face a mix of anxiety and awe. Victoria straightened and turned toward the elevator, Lauren at her side. "That was intense," Lauren muttered under her breath. "She needed to see it firsthand," Victoria replied. "They all do." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Victoria and Lauren stepped inside. As they ascended to the top floor, Victoria took a deep breath, steadying herself for the challenges ahead. This wasn't just about ownership, it was about transformation. The Everest wasn't going to be a symbol of exclusion anymore. It was going to become the standard for inclusivity and respect in the luxury hospitality industry. The elevator opened to a sleek, modern corridor. At the end of the hall was Victoria's new office, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city. Lauren opened the door for her, revealing a space that exuded understated elegance. The room was filled with natural light, and the city skyline stretched endlessly in the distance. Victoria set her bag down on the polished wooden desk and looked out over the view. "It's beautiful," she admitted. Lauren nodded, leaning against the desk. "And it's yours. So what's the first move?" Victoria turned to face her, a determined glint in her eye. "The staff meeting. I want them to hear directly from me." Lauren smiled. "This is going to be interesting." Minutes later, the Everest's conference room filled with its employees, front desk clerks, housekeeping staff, chefs, and management. They filed in quietly, whispering among themselves as they speculated about what the new ownership might mean. At the head of the table sat Robert Drake, the Everest's longtime general manager. He was known for his unyielding adherence to the hotel's elite image, and his tense posture made it clear he was bracing for something. Victoria entered the room with Lauren close behind, and the murmurs immediately quieted. She took her place at the head of the table, scanning the faces of the assembled staff. Some looked curious, others apprehensive. Drake's expression was guarded, though a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Good evening," Victoria began, her voice steady. "As many of you are aware, the Everest Hotel is now under new ownership. I am Victoria Hayes, and I will be overseeing the future of this establishment." She paused, letting her words sink in. The Everest has a long-standing reputation as a symbol of luxury and prestige, but it's also a place with a complicated history, one that, until recently, upheld exclusionary practices that have no place in modern society. Drake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Miss Hayes, with all due respect—" Victoria raised a hand, silencing him. "This isn't the time for excuses, Mr. Drake. I'm not here to debate the past. I'm here to set the course for the future." The room fell silent again as Victoria continued. "This hotel will no longer be defined by outdated notions of exclusivity. From this point forward, the Everest will be a place where every guest feels valued, regardless of their background. Our policies, our practices, and our culture will reflect that." Drake's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Victoria's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of each staff member. "This is an opportunity for all of us to grow. There will be new training programs, new hiring practices, and new expectations. If anyone feels they cannot align with these values, you're welcome to find employment elsewhere." A soft murmur rippled through the room. Victoria continued, her tone softening slightly. "I know change isn't easy, but I believe in this hotel, and I believe in all of you. Together we can create something extraordinary, a place that not only upholds the highest standards of luxury, but also embodies the principles of respect, inclusion, and progress." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Victoria's surprise, a young housekeeper in the back raised her hand. "Miss Hayes," she said nervously, "does this mean we'll have more opportunities? I mean, people like me?" Victoria smiled warmly. "Absolutely. Everyone here will have opportunities to grow, to learn, and to advance. The Everest isn't just a workplace, it's a community, and in this community, no one gets left behind." The housekeeper nodded, a faint smile appearing on her face. Slowly, a few others began to nod as well, the tension in the room easing. After the meeting, Lauren approached Victoria with a satisfied grin. "Well, that was a statement." Victoria exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. "It's only the beginning. Now comes the hard part." As they walked back to the elevator, Victoria's mind was already racing with ideas. The Everest's transformation wasn't just about changing policies. It was about reshaping an entire culture. And if there was one thing Victoria Hayes knew how to do, it was build something new from the ground up. Victoria Hayes spent the following weeks in relentless motion, pouring every ounce of her energy into reshaping the Everest Hotel. It wasn't enough to simply implement new policies. Victoria was determined to uproot the deeply ingrained culture that had allowed exclusion to thrive in its walls for decades. This transformation wouldn't just be about appearances, it would be about creating a place that truly reflected the values she championed. The first step was revamping the training programs. Victoria brought in a team of diversity and inclusion experts who specialized in reshaping workplace cultures. These trainers didn't just give lectures, they engaged employees in workshops and discussions, encouraging them to confront their biases and rethink their approach to hospitality. One such session focused on empathy in guest interactions. Employees were asked to imagine themselves in the shoes of someone who felt unwelcome, and the exercise led to several poignant realizations. A front desk clerk, who had worked at the Everest for over a decade, raised his hand during the discussion. "I didn't realize how much of our behavior is shaped by assumptions," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "I've probably made guests feel uncomfortable without even knowing it. That's not the kind of person I want to be." Victoria, who was observing from the back of the room, felt a flicker of hope. This was why she was here, not to shame the staff, but to inspire them to be better. Next came the hiring overhaul. Victoria worked with her HR team to ensure that new roles at the Everest were filled by people from diverse backgrounds. She wanted the hotel's leadership to reflect the inclusivity she was striving to achieve. This meant creating opportunities for individuals who had been overlooked or excluded in the past. It wasn't long before the effects of these changes began to ripple through the hotel. Guests from all walks of life started filling the Everest's grand lobby. Families, business travelers, and tourists from around the world. Each one was welcomed with the same warmth and professionalism, regardless of their appearance or status. But not everyone embraced the new direction. Robert Drake, the general manager, was becoming increasingly resistant. Though he followed Victoria's instructions outwardly, his disapproval simmered just below the surface. He resented what he saw as a dismantling of the Everest's traditions and worried that the changes would alienate the hotel's high-end clientele. One afternoon, Victoria called Drake into her office. The tension between them had been building, and it was time to address it directly. "Mr. Drake," she began, gesturing for him to sit, "we need to talk about your role here." Drake sat stiffly, his expression guarded. "Of course, Miss Hayes. What's on your mind?" Victoria folded her hands on the desk. "I've noticed your reluctance to embrace the changes we're implementing. I need to know if you're truly committed to this new vision for the Everest." Drake hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Miss Hayes, with all due respect, the Everest has always been a symbol of exclusivity. That's what our clientele expects. I'm concerned that by shifting our focus, we risk losing what makes this hotel special." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Exclusivity and quality are not the same thing, Mr. Drake. We can offer a world-class experience without making people feel like they don't belong. If we lose guests because they can't accept a more inclusive environment, then perhaps they're not the kind of guests we want." Drake bristled. "And if the revenue suffers?" Victoria leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Then we'll adapt. The world is changing, Mr. Drake. Luxury isn't about shutting people out. It's about creating unforgettable experiences for everyone. If you can't align with that vision, I'll need to find someone who can." The silence between them was heavy. Drake stared at her, his jaw clenched, before finally nodding. "I understand." As he left the office, Victoria sighed, knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Resistance to change was inevitable, but she wouldn't let it derail her mission. Meanwhile, Lauren had been busy managing the Everest's public image. She worked with a PR team to craft messaging around the hotel's transformation, emphasizing its commitment to inclusivity while maintaining its reputation for luxury. Press releases highlighted the new staff training programs, diverse hiring initiatives, and updated guest policies. The media began to take notice. Articles appeared praising Victoria's leadership and her bold vision for the Everest. Some critics questioned whether the changes would alienate the hotel's traditional clientele, but others applauded her for redefining what luxury could mean in the modern era. One evening, Victoria sat in her office reviewing the latest press coverage. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and Lauren entered, holding a tablet. "You need to see this," Lauren said, her tone a mix of excitement and urgency. Victoria took the tablet and watched a short video clip. It showed a young woman in a housekeeper's uniform addressing a community gathering. The woman was speaking about her experience working at the Everest since Victoria had taken over. "I never thought someone like me could have a real career in a place like this," the housekeeper said, her voice filled with emotion. "Miss Hayes believed in us, believed in me. And now I believe in myself." Victoria felt a lump form in her throat as the video ended. "Who is she?" she asked. "Her name's Annika," Lauren replied. "She's one of the staff who's really embraced the changes. That clip's already gone viral. It's inspiring a lot of people." Victoria smiled, her heart swelling with pride. This was the kind of impact she had hoped for, not just transforming a business, but changing lives. As the Everest continued its journey of reinvention, Victoria knew there were still challenges ahead. But for the first time, she felt a sense of momentum, a growing belief that they were building something truly extraordinary. And this was only the beginning. The Everest Hotel's transformation was progressing at full speed, but Victoria Hayes knew that their work wouldn't be complete until they faced the hotel's history head-on. Through her research, Victoria had uncovered troubling details about the Everest's past, a legacy of exclusion and elitism that had once defined its reputation. This history was more than just a blemish. It was a wound that needed healing. Victoria called a meeting with her core team, including Lauren and the newly promoted Annika, to discuss the next steps. The room was filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension as they gathered around a large conference table. "Thank you all for coming," Victoria began, her tone steady but serious. "As we've worked to reshape the Everest, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on its history. The truth is, this hotel wasn't always a welcoming place, and we can't truly move forward without acknowledging that." Lauren nodded, her face thoughtful. "You're talking about the segregation policies, right? The ones from decades ago?" Victoria gave a small nod. "Yes. The Everest used to represent everything we're working to dismantle now. If we want to build a lasting legacy, we have to confront that history and show that we've learned from it." Annika leaned forward, her eyes filled with determination. "How do we do that? People don't always want to talk about the past, especially when it's uncomfortable." Victoria looked around the room, her gaze resolute. "We're going to create a platform for those conversations. I'm organizing an event called the Everest Legacy Symposium. It'll be a public acknowledgement of the hotel's past and a celebration of the changes we're making." The room fell silent for a moment as the team absorbed her words. Then Lauren spoke, her voice tinged with admiration. "That's bold, Victoria, and it's exactly what we need." Victoria outlined her vision for the symposium, a gathering of historians, community leaders, and industry experts to discuss the history of exclusivity in the hospitality world and how it could evolve into a more inclusive future. The event would include panel discussions, personal testimonies, and a keynote speech from Victoria herself. The announcement of the symposium sparked immediate interest. Media outlets praised Victoria's willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, while skeptics questioned whether such an event would tarnish the Everest's image. Victoria knew there would be resistance, but she was prepared for it. She wasn't doing this for approval. She was doing it because it was the right thing to do. In the weeks leading up to the symposium, the hotel buzzed with preparations. Victoria worked closely with Lauren to finalize the guest list and ensure that every detail of the event reflected their mission. Annika, now overseeing guest relations, played a key role in coordinating the logistics, her newfound confidence shining through in every task she tackled. As the day of the symposium arrived, the Everest's grand ballroom was transformed into a space of reflection and dialogue. The walls were adorned with photographs and artifacts that told the story of the hotel's past, both its triumphs and its failings. A diverse crowd filled the room, representing a wide range of voices and perspectives. Victoria stood at the podium, her heart pounding as she gazed out at the audience. She had faced many challenges in her career, but this felt different. This was deeply personal. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This event is not just about the Everest. It's about acknowledging the broader history of exclusion in our industry and taking steps to ensure it's never repeated." The audience was rapt as Victoria spoke about the hotel's legacy and the journey they were embarking on. She didn't shy away from the difficult truths, addressing the pain that policies of the past had caused. But she also spoke of hope, of the progress they were making and the vision they were working toward. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a genuine outpouring of support. Victoria stepped back from the podium, her chest swelling with a mix of relief and pride. The panel discussions that followed were equally powerful. Annika shared her own journey, recounting how her role at the Everest had changed her life and inspired her to dream bigger. Devon, another rising star at the hotel, spoke about the importance of creating opportunities for people who had been overlooked. Their stories resonated deeply, drawing standing ovations from the audience. By the end of the evening, it was clear that the symposium had been a success. Guests lingered in the ballroom, engaging in animated conversations and sharing their own experiences. For many, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the Everest, but for the industry as a whole. As the crowd began to disperse, Victoria found a quiet corner to reflect. Annika approached her, a look of awe on her face. "That was incredible," Annika said softly. "You didn't just change this hotel. You gave people hope." Victoria smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "This isn't just about a building, Annika. It's about building something bigger than all of us." Annika nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Together, they watched as the last guests filtered out, the echoes of the evening's conversations lingering in the air. For Victoria, the symposium was a milestone, a moment of reckoning and renewal. But she knew there was still work to be done. The Everest's transformation was far from over, and she was ready to continue leading the charge. The success of the Everest Legacy Symposium reverberated far beyond the hotel's gilded walls. Victoria Hayes had not only redefined what the Everest Hotel represented, but had also sparked a conversation that resonated across the hospitality industry. Yet, for Victoria, the symposium wasn't the end of her mission. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Victoria sat in her office, the city skyline stretching out before her. The sunlight streaming through the windows seemed brighter, as if reflecting the hope ignited the night before. Annika entered with a steaming cup of coffee, setting it gently on the desk. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" Annika asked, concern mingling with admiration. Victoria offered a tired but genuine smile. "Too many ideas racing through my head. Last night was powerful, but we can't stop here. We need to ensure this momentum doesn't fade." Annika pulled up a chair, her curiosity piqued. "What are you thinking?" Victoria leaned forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "We've transformed the Everest into a symbol of inclusivity and progress. But this is just one hotel. The industry still has a long way to go. What if we expanded this vision, took what we've learned and applied it to other properties?" Annika's eyes lit up. "Are you talking about creating a network? Like a chain of inclusive luxury hotels?" "Exactly," Victoria said, her voice filled with determination. "We can create a new standard, a network of hotels that prioritizes diversity, empowers local communities, and offers luxury without exclusion." The idea was ambitious, but it resonated deeply with both women. Annika's enthusiasm was infectious as she began jotting down notes. They envisioned hotels that not only catered to a diverse clientele, but also partnered with local businesses, provided training for underrepresented groups, and contributed meaningfully to their communities. Victoria wasted no time assembling a team to bring the idea to life. She reached out to Lauren and other key staff members, as well as new experts in finance, community engagement, and hospitality operations. Each team member was chosen not just for their expertise, but for their alignment with the mission. Over the next few months, the team worked tirelessly to identify properties that aligned with their vision. Victoria focused on acquiring struggling hotels that had potential but needed a cultural and operational overhaul. These properties became blank slates, ready to be reimagined as symbols of inclusivity and excellence. One of the first properties they targeted was an old coastal resort known for its exclusivity, a place that once prided itself on catering to only the wealthiest clientele. Its grandeur had faded over the years, and it was now on the brink of financial collapse. Victoria saw an opportunity to transform it into a beacon of change. The negotiations were tense but ultimately successful. As soon as the ink dried on the contract, Victoria and her team rolled up their sleeves and got to work. They implemented new hiring practices, brought in diversity and inclusion experts, and established partnerships with local businesses to source goods and services. The changes weren't just cosmetic. The resort staff underwent extensive training, learning to embrace a culture of openness and respect. Guests who once felt unwelcome now found themselves at home, greeted warmly and treated with the same level of care and attention as anyone else. Word of the transformation spread quickly. The resort reopened under a new name, Coastal Horizon, and it became an instant success. Families, couples, and solo travelers of all backgrounds filled the rooms, drawn not only by the luxurious amenities, but by the resort's reputation as a place where everyone belonged. As Victoria watched the first guests check in, she felt a swell of pride. This was what she had envisioned, a space where no one would have to fight for their right to be there. The success of Coastal Horizon encouraged the team to keep pushing forward. They acquired more properties, each with its unique challenges and opportunities. Some required extensive renovations, while others needed complete cultural overhauls. But with each new hotel, Victoria's vision became clearer, and her resolve grew stronger. One evening, Victoria and Annika sat on the terrace of Coastal Horizon, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The ocean sparkled with the last rays of daylight, casting a serene glow over the resort. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Annika asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Victoria smiled, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I can, but it's not just about how far we've come. It's about how far we still have to go." Annika nodded. "What's next?" Victoria turned to her, her expression resolute. "We keep building. Not just hotels, but opportunities. We mentor the next generation of leaders, expand our partnerships, and make sure this isn't just a moment. It's a movement." Over the following months, the network of inclusive hotels continued to grow. Victoria's reputation as a trailblazer in the industry solidified, and her efforts began to inspire other hoteliers to rethink their practices. She was invited to speak at conferences, where she shared her journey and encouraged others to embrace change. At one such event, she met Daniel, a young entrepreneur with a vision for creating accessible luxury experiences. The two connected instantly, their shared passion for inclusivity sparking a collaboration that would expand Victoria's mission even further. Together, they launched the Unity Initiative, a global program aimed at bringing inclusivity and diversity to all aspects of the hospitality industry. The initiative provided funding for aspiring hoteliers from underrepresented backgrounds, creating pathways for a new generation of leaders. As the years passed, the Everest became more than just a hotel. It became the flagship of a movement. Victoria's vision had taken root, spreading across the globe and touching countless lives. She often thought back to that first day when she stood in the lobby, denied entry because of someone else's prejudice. Now she walked through those same doors as a leader, a changemaker, and an inspiration. One day, as Victoria prepared for a meeting, Annika entered her office with a framed photo. It was a picture of the original team on the day the Everest rebranded, their faces beaming with pride. "I thought you'd like to have this," Annika said, placing the frame on Victoria's desk. Victoria picked up the photo, her eyes scanning the familiar faces. She smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Annika. This means a lot." As she placed the photo on her shelf, Victoria felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had turned adversity into opportunity, creating something that would outlive her and continue to make a difference for generations to come. For Victoria Hayes, This was more than success. It was a legacy, and she knew it was only the beginning.